gentlemen, and thank you so much for joining me. Today it is Wednesday, which means we are doing quarterback and kicker rankings. But before we kick it off, if you are new, if you haven't done it yet, please like and subscribe. It really helps me out, enables me to do what I love, and continue to bring you content that you love. So with all that out of the way, let's get into this week's quarterback rankings. At number one, back on the mountaintop after a little bit of a vacation, is Josh Allen. He gets an amazing matchup against Kansas City. If you needed another reason to start him, the Chiefs allow the second most points to quarterbacks. I expect an absolutely monster day for him. He has over 600 passing yards, 50 rushing yards, and 7 touchdowns in his last 2 games. Coming in at number 2 is Kyler Murray. He is the current leader in the NFL in completion percentage, and for my money, the MVP race as well. Murray has definitely cooled off since starting the season in weeks 1 and 2 with overall QB1 finishes. However, this matchup is going to allow him to threaten the top spot once again. The 49ers allow over 23 points a game to passers. He is currently 3rd in the league in passing yards and tied for 5th with 9 touchdowns through the air. In at number 3 is Patrick Mahomes, and it seems that even the toughest matchup is not enough to drop him out of our top 3 rankings. We talked a little bit about Mean Mahomes and his revenge after back-to-back losses that could have been squarely placed on his shoulders, and he showed up. He has 5 touchdown passes last week, just absolutely decimating anyone in his way, and he is 5th in the league right now in passing yards and 1st in touchdowns with 14. Our 4th player is Lamar Jackson, who gets a Colts defense who is in the middle of the road at giving up 20 points a game to passers. Now, Jackson is averaging 300 yards passing in his last 2 games, so he's finally getting that part of his game on track after really struggling with it early on. He also has 279 rushing yards on the year, and he will produce this week. In at number 5 is Tom Brady. He gets the Dolphins, and even after a lackluster performance against New England on Sunday night, we find him here. Now, I think a couple of things definitely played into that poor performance, weather being one of the key ones. While Brady has just 2 passing touchdowns in his last 2 games, this is a solid get-right opportunity for him. He is 2nd in the league in passing yardage with 1,356 and is tied for 3rd with 10 touchdown passes. In at number 6 is Dak Prescott, and he gets an excellent matchup against the Giants, who are allowing 22 points per game. Prescott was able to finish back in the top 7 after a 2-week absence from there, and he has 7 touchdowns over his last 2 games. Now, his efficiency and volume have certainly fluctuated, and over his last 3 games, he's only averaged 20 attempts per. However, because of the increase in the ability of the running game, the efficiency has spiked and he's been fine. Our 7th ranked player is Matthew Stafford, and he also has a great matchup against the Seattle Seahawks defense, giving up the 8th most points to the position. Stafford is averaging 3 touchdowns and over 310 yards in his last 2 games, and he has never finished lower than QB 19. He has 3 finishes in the top 15. Stafford ranks 4th in the NFL with 1,222 passing yards, and he should be able to pick apart Seattle on Thursday night. Next up is Jalen Hurts, and he gets Carolina and finds himself at number 8. Hurts has been as consistent as they come. He has 4 straight finishes in the top 10 to start the season. In his last 2 starts, he has 713 passing yards and 4 touchdowns, so we like him even with the Panthers allowing just 16.5 points per game to passers. In at number 9, we have Russell Wilson, and he gets the Rams. Now, surprisingly, this matchup doesn't scare you, as the Rams defense is the middle of the road against quarterbacks. What might scare you, however, is that half of the games that Russ has played this year, he's attempted just 23 passes, so that lack of volume is slightly concerning. I expect a much heavier passing attack this week, especially with Chris Carson being banged up and then potentially having to rely on Alex Collins. Aaron Rodgers barely makes it into our top 10 as he rounds it out. And perhaps one of the biggest surprises so far in this fantasy season is that Rodgers is yet to throw for 300 yards. He does have 9 touchdowns in his last 3 games, and he hasn't dropped below 248 yards passing in that time. The Bengals allow just over 16 points a game to signal callers, but that is not enough for me to keep Rodgers outside of our top 10. Next up is Justin Herbert against the Browns. And while the Browns are far more susceptible to the pass than they are to the run, that still doesn't make this a great matchup. Herbert has been on fire after a slow start, and he has 7 touchdowns over his last 2 games. He is 8th in the NFL in passing yards, and he is tied for 5th with 9 touchdown passes, and he's going to be doing just enough here to finish as a low-end QB1. Rounding out those QB1s is Daniel Jones at 12 against Dallas. Jones comes in as the QB6 on the season, and he just threw for over 400 yards against a very tough matchup in New Orleans. Jones is currently 7th in the NFL with 1,184 passing yards, and the Cowboys come in as the 4th worst team against passers, giving up 23.5 points per game. So this matchup should allow Jones his 3rd top 12 finish in 4 weeks. Well deserving of lucky number 13, we have Kirk Cousins, who gets Detroit. And Cousins was par for the course and shrunk in the big game. He threw for just over 200 yards last week, had 1 touchdown and a pick, by far his worst output of the season. The Lions, however, are a decent bounce back opportunity here. They are still in the upper half of the league and allow 18 points a game. Cousins remains top 10 in both yards and touchdowns, and he may have to air it out a little bit more as Dalvin Cook is still banged up. Our 14th ranked player is Sam Darnold, coming in against Philadelphia. Now, Darnold has 3 straight games over 300 yards, and this is a decent matchup. He's going to be relied on heavily with CMC still out, so the volume is going to be there. He has 5 rushing touchdowns on the year, and we know that pace won't continue, but it doesn't need to be for Darnold to be able to produce quarterback 2 numbers. He has 2 touchdowns in every single game that he's played so far in this season. Our 15th ranked player is one of my favorites, and that is Trey Lance. Now, this is, of course, assuming that Jimmy Garoppolo has to sit with his injury. Lance's upside cannot be ignored. You have to score to keep up with the Cardinals, and Lance showed that he was capable of doing that last week in relief. He had 2 touchdown passes in the second half, both to Deebo Samuel, and he also added 7 carries for 41 yards on the ground. We know there are going to be growing pains, particularly through the air for Lance, but I am betting on the talent and the capital that San Francisco spent, taking him number 3 overall. Next up, we have Joe Burrow, and he slides in here at 16, and he gets the Green Bay Packers. The matchup here doesn't scare you, as the Packers are allowing 20 points a game to signal callers and are now likely to be without their stud corner in Jair Alexander, who is dealing with a shoulder injury. Burrow is also potentially getting T. Higgins back from injury. Burrow has 5 touchdown passes over the last 2 weeks and should have a solid encore here after he lit up the Jags in primetime on Thursday. At 17 on our list is Derek Carr, and he gets the Bears. Now, Carr's dominance finally came to a halt last week in his first minus matchup of the season. That broke a 3-game streak where he threw for a minimum of 382 yards. He still leads the league in passing after throwing for under 200 last week, and I think expectations need to be tempered as the Bears are one of the top 10 teams in the NFL, allowing just 17 points a game to quarterbacks. Carr has 2 touchdowns in every game he's played this season. At 18, it's Ryan Tannehill, and he gets Jacksonville on the road. Tannehill comes in averaging 260 yards a game on the season. He also has 4 touchdown passes in his last 2 games. This is a top 10 matchup for him, and the Jags just got lit up for 348 yards by Joe Burrow on Thursday. He should also get at least one of his 2 top pass catchers back in Julio Jones, so that certainly helps him. Our 19th ranked player is the number 1 overall pick in Trevor Lawrence, and he really struggled against Cincinnati. He completed just 17 out of his 24 passes for 204 yards and a touchdown. He also has just 3 touchdowns in his last 3 games after starting the year with 3 in week 1. The Titans, however, are allowing over 20.5 points a game to passers, so this is the perfect rebound game for him. Matt Ryan rounds out our top 20 after exploding last week for 4 touchdowns after he started his first 3 games with just 4 combined. He gets a really tough matchup against a top 5 Jets passing defense, so temper expectations as the volume may go more towards the running game than the passing game. Our 21st player is Taylor Heineke, and he gets a matchup against the Saints that you don't love. Mr. Bud Light comes in averaging nearly 280 yards passing, and he hasn't finished outside the top 12 in any of his 3 starts this season. That streak will most likely end as New Orleans is allowing less than 15 points a game to quarterbacks. Jared Goff finds himself at number 22 as the Vikings are one of the bottom half teams in the NFL, stopping the pass. You don't mind the matchup one bit. Goff is also coming off of a very strong performance against the solid Bears defense where he threw for 299 yards and a pair of touchdowns. Someone I never thought that I would see even inside our top 25 at quarterback is our 23rd player in Jacoby Brissett. And this is all about the matchup. The Bucs allow the 6th most points per game to signal callers, and Brissett has just 414 yards passing in his last 2 games. And he also has 3 touchdowns during that time frame. So it gives you a little bit of hope to start him against Tampa. Up next at 24 is Jameis Winston, and he has 4 touchdowns in his last 3 games after exploding in week 1 with 5. Now, Washington does allow 28 points a game to quarterbacks, so you love the matchup. I don't think he booms here, but he should have enough opportunity to warrant a low-end quarterback 2 start. A couple notable omissions for us. Number 1, Carson Wentz at Baltimore. Maybe we start him when he can walk. Next up, we have Ben Roethlisberger against Denver. Maybe we start him when he can throw. And finally, we have Mac Jones against Houston. Maybe we start him when he breaks the top 20. If you guys have any questions, if you have any comments, please drop those down below. And now, let's quickly run through our kickers. In at number 1 for us is Justin Tucker. He gets Indianapolis this week. At 2, we have Harrison Butker, and at 3, the counterpart in that game in Tyler Bass, in what should be a very high-scoring game between Kansas City and Buffalo. At 4, we have Daniel Carlson. We know that Vegas is going to move the ball against Chicago, but they might be stopped short and give him opportunities. At 5, it's Matt Prater. Arizona cannot be stopped on offense, and I don't anticipate that changes this week. At 6, it's Matt Gay against Seattle. Love the Rams offense. At 7, it's Greg Zuerlein, who gets the Giants. 8th spot comes out to Greg Joseph. He plays the Lions. At 9, it's Ryan Suckup. There should be plenty of scoring opportunities for him against Miami. At number 10 is Evan McPherson, and at number 11 is Mason Crosby in that Green Bay-Cincinnati showdown. And then finally at 12, we have Young Ho Koo, who should see decent opportunities against the Jets. Thank you so much for joining me today, ladies and gentlemen. If you are new or haven't done it yet, please like and subscribe. It helps me out and continues to allow me to do what I love and bring you content that you love. This is Relentless Press. I am your host, Abraham Opatz, and we will see you next time.